Empire of Ashes, Episode 1, The Debt. Written by Mia. They came to collect on the morning we buried my father, which tells you everything you need to know about the Marchetti family and the kind of mercy they keep. It was raining the gray, indifferent rain this city specializes in, the kind that does not fall so much as hang, and I stood at the edge of the open grave in a black coat that was not warm enough and watched them lower the only person who had ever loved me into the ground. There were 9 of us. My father had built a shipping company out of nothing across 40 years, had shaken the hands of senators and bishops, and in the end 9 people stood in the rain to see him off, because everyone else in this city had already done the arithmetic and decided that a dead man's daughter was not worth being seen beside. My father had been a good man, which in this city is a kind of slow suicide. He believed in the handshake and the honest manifest, and the idea that if you worked hard enough and kept your books clean enough, the world would eventually agree to be fair. He had built Russo shipping out of 1 leased boat and 40 years of that belief, and he had raised me on it. We are not like them, Lena, we do not need to be like them. And I had believed him the way you believe weather completely until the week I came home and learned what believing it had cost. He used to stand at the harbor rail at dawn with his coffee and name the ships coming in. He knew everyone. He knew the captain's children by name. And 9 people came to bury him. And the men who had bled him white for 2 years sent a son in a beautiful suit to stand at the gate and make sure the body actually went down. That was the lesson the city had been trying to teach my father his whole stubborn life and finally taught his daughter in the rain. Clean books do not protect you. They only make you easier to read. The Marchettis did the arithmetic differently. The Marchettis had already decided I was worth a great deal. I felt them before I saw them. That particular stillness that moves through a crowd when something dangerous enters it, the way pigeons go quiet before the cat. 2 men in beautiful dark suits at the cemetery gate, not coming closer, not needing to. And between them, under a black umbrella held by someone else, because men like him do not hold their own umbrellas, a third. I had never met Dario Marchetti. I had spent my whole life being taught to be afraid of his name, which is a different and more thorough kind of knowing. He was younger than I expected and stiller than any living thing has a right to be, and even at that distance, through that gray hanging rain, I felt his attention land on me and stay, heavy as a hand between the shoulder blades. He did not look at the grave. He looked at me the way you look at a column of figures you already know the sum of, and I understood that my father was not the only thing being buried that morning. Some version of my life was going into the ground too. I did not look away. I want that on the record, whatever else comes. On the worst morning of my life, with the rain in my collar and my father 6 feet down, I met the eyes of the man my family had taught me to fear, and I did not look away, because I had spent the last 3 months learning exactly what the Marchettis had done to us, and I had made myself a promise in the small hours, and a promise made in the small hours is the only kind that holds. He inclined his head a fraction. Then the umbrella turned, and the dark suits folded around him, and they were gone before the first shovel of wet earth went down, and I was left to bury my father in the rain with the taste of the whole rotten arrangement already in my mouth. The lawyer explained it to me that afternoon, in an office that smelled of old paper and apology. My father had been a proud man and a careful one, and somewhere in the last hard years, the years I'd been away at university, the years he'd written me letters that said everything is fine, study hard, the careful had cracked. There had been a bad season. A seized shipment, a port official who changed his price, a loan that could not come from a bank because banks ask questions, and so it had come from the only institution in the city that asks none. It had come from the Marchettis. And my father, too proud to tell me, had spent his last 2 years paying interest to the family that, I was now certain, had arranged the seizure in the first place, had manufactured the crisis, then sold him the cure, the way they had done to 100 men before him. The way they built everything, heat and force, and then they own you. I had pieced it together slowly, in the 3 months I'd been home. The seized shipment had not been bad luck. The port official who flagged it bought a boat of his own the following spring, a nice one, and you do not buy nice boats on a custom salary. The bank that abruptly called my father's credit line took on a new silent partner that same quarter, and if you followed the silent partner through 3 shell companies you arrived, as you always arrived in this city, at a Marchetti. They had not preyed on a weak man. They had made him weak, deliberately, patiently, the way you starve a field before you buy it cheap, and then arrived at his door with sympathy and alone, and my proud father, too ashamed to tell his daughter he was drowning, had taken the hand that was holding him under and thanked it. For 2 years he paid. For 2 years he wrote me everything is fine, study hard. And it was killing him by inches the whole time, and I had been 600 miles away reading those letters and believing them, because believing my father was the last childish thing I had left. The principal is here, the lawyer said, sliding a single sheet across the desk, and I looked at the number at the bottom and felt the floor tilt. It was not a number a person pays. It was a number designed never to be paid, a number that exists only to become a leash. The company, I said. My voice came out level. I was proud of that. They want the company. The lawyer would not meet my eyes. There is, he said carefully, an alternative arrangement on the table. From the family, in lieu of the company and the debt. He cleared his throat. It was conveyed to me this morning. Before the funeral. Before the funeral. They had drawn it up while my father was still warm. Say it, I said. A marriage, the lawyer said, between yourself and Dario Marchetti. The debt forgiven. The company kept in your name under their protection. You would want for nothing. He finally looked at me, and there was real pity in it, which was almost worse than the rest. Miss Russo, I have to advise you that these are not people one refuses. The debt is real, and they will take the company and everything attached to your father's name, and you will be left with nothing and no shelter from them at all. Or I marry the man who killed him. The lawyer flinched. He had not said it. I had. We sat with it in the smell of old paper, and outside the window the gray rain hung over the harbor where my father's ships were already, I had no doubt, being counted by other men. Here is the thing the lawyer did not know, the thing the Marchettis did not know, the thing I had told no one in the world. 3 months ago, when the letter stopped saying everything is fine, I had come home early and quietly, and I had started going through my father's accounts. Not the ones he showed people. The other ones, the careful man's careful private records, the ledger he kept in a language of his own invention in a book behind a panel in his study. I had spent 3 months learning to read it, and what I had found in it was not just the record of one ruined man's debt. It was names, dates, the architecture of how the Marchettis turned honest men into owned ones, and buried in the middle of it, in my father's small furious hand, the thing he had figured out in the last year of his life, and had not lived long enough to use. I did not yet know exactly what that thing was. The ledger was half cipher, and I was only halfway through it. But I knew it had frightened a careful man badly enough to hide it behind a wall, and I knew that 2 weeks after he wrote it, his careful heart had stopped in a way the doctors called natural, and I did not believe for one moment. I had photographed every page before I slid the panel back into the wall. I had them still, on a drive sewn into the lining of the coat that was not warm enough, 300 images of a dead man's private fury, written in a cipher of his own making. Most of it I could read now. It was a record of every dirty arrangement my father had been forced into. Yes, but it was more than that, because Aldo Russo had been a careful man who could not stop himself keeping honest books even about dishonest things. He had written down what he saw, the names behind the names, which judges, which captains, which priests, the route the family's real money took through the harbor he had given his life to. And on the second to last page, in a hand that shook so badly I could barely read it, he had written 6 lines I had not yet decoded, 6 lines, and beside them a single word, underlined twice, pressed so hard the pen had torn the paper. The word was proof. 2 weeks later, he was dead of natural causes. I am not a fool, and I do not believe in coincidences that convenient, and I had decided, at his graveside in the rain, that I would finish reading those 6 lines if it cost me everything I had left, which was, after all, only my life. So when the lawyer said these are not people one refuses, I almost laughed. I was not going to refuse. I was going to say yes and walk straight through the front door of the Marchetti family and stand at the side of the man who had ordered my father's ruin and smile and be the perfect frightened bride. And the whole time I would be inside their house, inside their lives, inside reach of everything they had ever buried. They thought they were buying a leash. They were letting the only person alive who could read my father's ledger move into the room where the rest of its secrets slept. Tell them yes, I said, and stood and buttoned my coat that was not warm enough. Tell them the bride is grateful. I met him properly 3 days later, in a restaurant that had been emptied of every other diner for the occasion, which I would learn was simply how Dario Marchetti took his meals. He rose when I came in. That surprised me. I had not expected manners from a monster. Up close he was worse than at the cemetery, because up close I could see that the stillness was not coldness. Coldness would have been easier. It was control, total and deliberate, a man holding something heavy so steadily that you forgot it was heavy at all. His eyes were dark and unhurried, and they moved over my face the way they had moved over me in the rain, reading, and I made myself sit and pour my own water and not let my hand shake. "You buried your father well," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss." "You arranged it." I had not meant to say it. It came out of me clean and quiet, and the 2 men by the door went very still, and for one long moment Dario Marchetti simply looked at me, and I thought, well, that's it then. That was a short war. Then something moved at the corner of his mouth that was almost a smile, and was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "You're not what they told me," he said. "What did they tell you?" "That Aldo Russo had a quiet daughter." He turned his glass a quarter turn on the white cloth, the way you'd reposition a chess piece. "Studying abroad. Soft. Grateful, when the time came, to be saved." The dark eyes lifted to mine and held. "Whereas you sat down at this table and accused me of murder before the bread came, and your heart didn't so much as stumble. I can hear hearts, Miss Russo. Yours is very steady for a soft, grateful girl." The warning in it was unmistakable. "I see you. Whatever you think you're doing, I see you." And the sensible thing, the surviving thing, would have been to fold, to weep a little, to give him the frightened bride he'd ordered and paid for. But I had made a promise in the small hours, and I looked at the man who had taken my father from me, and I decided that if I was going to walk into the lion's mouth, I would not do it on my knees. "Then we understand each other," I said, and lifted my own glass, and made my voice as steady as he'd accused it of being. "I'm not soft, and I'm not grateful, and I'm going to marry you anyway, because you've arranged it, so I have nothing else. So, let's not pretend it's a kindness. Let's just see which of us is better at this. The silence stretched. Outside, the city went about its gray business, oblivious. And then Dario Marchetti laughed, low, short, genuinely surprised, a sound I suspected did not get out of him often, and lifted his glass to mine across the empty restaurant, and I felt the trap close around us both, and I could not for the life of me have told you, in that moment, which of us it had caught. Yes, he said, and his dark eyes were bright now, interested, dangerous in a wholly new way. Let's. To be continued. That was episode 1 of Empire of Ashes. If this one has its hooks in you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus Dario POV bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.